Hi, I'm Dr. Christine Hanlon from the University of Central Florida, here to talk to you about extemporaneous speaking and how to develop a speech. So with extemporaneous speaking, we're looking at a very well-developed speech. It's well organized, it's well researched, you use evidence, it's well prepared, and it's well practiced. But how do you start? What do you do first? So the first thing that you want to do with an extemporaneous speech is you want to start writing some ideas. And you don't want to write out sentences. That's going to lead you to doing a manuscript delivery or a memorized delivery, and we certainly don't want that. We want a speech that's nice and conversational and allows you to have a little bit of spontaneity, so if you need to add something in or somebody interrupts you with a question, you don't have to have that awkward transition point. We want it to be nice and conversational. So for that reason, we don't want to write sentences out. We want to make sure that you're writing phrases. Think about bullet points. So that's how we're going to start. So the last thing that you want to do is open up a Word document here. Okay, so the first thing you want to do is go ahead and get some index cards. And I always get 5 index cards for a traditional informative speech. And I'll tell you about why that is in just a little bit. But go ahead and grab 5 index cards and we'll go ahead and we'll start developing the speech. So the first thing we want to think about an informative speech is that it does have 3 sections to it. So the first section is the introduction. Now we aren't going to start with the introduction though. You don't develop a speech in a linear fashion when you're developing one. You start in the middle, then you go back to the beginning, and then you go to the end. And so with the speech, you have the introduction, you have the body of the speech, which contains 3 main points, which of course are said 3 times during your speech. That helps American audiences to understand you and to remember the information. The last part of the speech, the third part of a speech, the first part, of course, is the introduction. The second part is the body. The third part is the conclusion. And so we're not going to start at the introduction and work linearly. What we're going to do is we're going to start with the body of the speech. We're going to start right here in the middle of the presentation. And we're going to think about what are we going to talk about? What are the meat and potatoes of the speech? So when we're doing that, we're going to take our 5 index cards and we're going to think 1 index card for the introduction, 1 index card for main point 1, 1 index card for main point 2, 1 index card for main point 3, and 1 index card for the conclusion. So as we're thinking about what we're going to talk about, we want to go ahead and we want to get into our index card 1, which is the main point number 1. That's where we're going to start talking about the speech, or we're going to start developing the speech. So with index card 1, we're starting with main point 1. And so I might put a 1 here to remind myself this is main point 1. You could write main point 1 here, but that's kind of a waste of your time. Probably don't want to do that. We're trying to work on writing less. So do you need the words main point in there? And you shouldn't be using speech construction language during a presentation anyways. You shouldn't be saying main point 1, main point 2, I'm transitioning now. I mean, that's awkward, right? So 1. So what's my main point 1? First of all, we got to think about what our overall topic is. And for this demonstration, what I'm going to use is a topic that I've heard many times in many different ways. I'm talking about a local organization called Pet Rescue by Judy. Pet Rescue by Judy is a rescue organization. They have dogs, they have cats, they have a large shelter facility where you can adopt animals. It's a wonderful organization in our community. So with Pet Rescue by Judy, we're going to be talking about volunteering at Pet Rescue by Judy. My 3 main points are going to be about how to get involved, thinking about the process of volunteering, right? So what are the steps for getting involved? The second main point is going to be thinking about volunteer opportunities. What are the different types of things that you can do at the shelter? And then the third main point are going to be more opportunities, more volunteer opportunities, but focusing on volunteer opportunities that we have in the community to help Pet Rescue by Judy. So I have my first index card. I'm looking at main point 1. My first main point is how to get involved. So I'm just going to write involved because it reminds me this is a part about getting involved. I don't have to write main point number 1, getting involved. There's no sentences here. We try to keep it as simple as possible. And then I want to think about what am I going to talk about with getting involved. Well, the first thing with getting involved is that you have to complete an application. And it's an online application. So I'm going to go ahead and write online app because I will remember that that means application. As soon as I say app, I'll be like application, okay? So it'll continue. I don't need to write out application. Another thing with getting involved in the beginning is that you have to attend an orientation. And that's a face-to-face orientation. And so there are some things that people need to know about that. So you're going to go into detail about that. If you've already been involved with Pet Rescue by Judy, you've completed the online application, you have completed the orientation, and you have also done the third part, which is choosing volunteer shifts. And there's an online process for doing that. You would know about this if you were involved in the organization, and you should always be presenting information about an experience, a topic that you have experience with. And so if you are a volunteer with Pet Rescue by Judy, which I wouldn't want you to deliver this speech if you weren't, you're going to know all about this, and you'll be able to explain it to an audience. So you don't need a whole lot of extra information here. You just need a couple of reminders of what you're going to talk about. Now you might be like, well, wait a minute, I don't want to forget this and that. And so you might want to be like, well, in the beginning, maybe I want to remind them, and maybe you're going to space this out a little bit more if you're one of those people who's going to say, I need a little bit more information than that. Maybe you want to remind them that it's a short application. Maybe you want to remind them that it's going to require something, and I don't even know if this is true or not, but maybe it requires something like a driver's license number to remind people to pull that out before they access the application. The other thing with orientation, maybe you want to tell them how long it is. I don't know how long they are nowadays. The one that I attended was about an hour long. You might want to talk about what you need to bring. So I'm just going to write bring. So you remember telling them, what do you need to bring to this orientation? I need to bring a pen. Do you need to bring your driver's license again? Those types of things. And then you want to think about volunteer shifts. Well, when you're signing up for them, how are they organized? Are they organized as 2 to 3 hour shifts? So we know how long each shift is. When are the shifts? When do they take place? So maybe talking about the timing of the shifts. Are there shifts available on the weekends? Are there shifts available in the evenings? What time do they start the day with volunteer shifts? Those types of things would be some interesting sub points to that sub point. So you might want to write that as your first draft, right? And this is all first draft. This is working on your first draft. So let's go ahead. We've done our first main point. You're going to do the same exact thing with your next index card. Go ahead and change that. So we have index card number 2. This is main point number 2, though. And so with main point 2, maybe you want to talk about the volunteer opportunities. Volunteer opportunities, what do I have? At the shelter. Okay, and so when you're talking about the volunteer opportunities at the shelter, maybe you want to talk about the fact that there's a lot of cleaning to be done. They need to keep the facility clean. They need to clean the cages, what that process entails, if you're going to need protective equipment for those types of things. Assisting with adoptions, working with families, talking to people, explaining the different personalities that different animals there have. And the last one, cuddling. I'm forgetting my L there. You could also say socialization, right? But you don't have to write it all out. And so you could add, again, the sub points here, but you don't probably need that because you've had this experience before. You know what volunteering at the shelter entails. And so you don't have to worry about adding in all that information. You just need prompts to remind you what you're talking about. And there's no reason to write sentences. There's no reason. You don't need sentences. So let's go to index card number 3. Index card number 3 is volunteer opportunities in the community. And that will remind you what that means, right? And then I want to say at UCF, we have opportunities. At pet stores, we have opportunities. And, and at community events, we have opportunities. So maybe you want to talk about the fact that at UCF, they have this program called Rent-A-Pup. And you're like, oh my goodness, I'm afraid I'm going to get to UCF and I'm going to, like, I don't know. So maybe you want to write in there, kind of Rent-A-Pup. Maybe you want to write in the different stores that you've been to, that you've worked with, right? You could write those here. Maybe you want to write the different events that you've worked at before or that you know that are coming up. And you might want to write those sub points in there to help you out, to remind you what you're going to talk about. That's draft one. Okay, so draft one's a little messy. You want to think about, if you're a visual person, if you want to write your cards with different colors, so it differentiates. This is the title of the card, so you know that's the main point, and these are the subpoints. But it shouldn't be any sentences. You don't need sentences. You just need prompts to remind you what you're talking about. You know what you're talking about. This is a topic that you are familiar with. Index card number 4, this is when we go back to the introduction. So let's talk about the introduction really quickly. The introduction has 5 components. You always open with impact. The 3 middle parts, those can be interchangeable. You can change up the order. So maybe it makes more sense to go open with impact and then speaker credentials, or maybe it makes sense to go open with impact and then connect with the audience. You can change these 3 up in terms of order. The last part of the introduction is always the preview of the main points. And that leads you directly into the body of your speech. So now that we know what the body of the speech is, now that we know what we're talking about, we can go back and we can fill in this part. If you started with this part and then you started developing the body of the speech and it started to go in a different direction than you had first anticipated, you're going to have to rewrite the introduction. You're going to have to rework that. And that's not going to be a good thing. And as you're writing your index card for this, think about, being very simple. And so just writing like open. You don't have to write open with impact. You can even just write impact, whatever that's going to be. And maybe you're going to tell a personal story about a specific animal that you worked with there. And maybe you just want to put Raz. That's the name of the animal. Once you see that name, you know exactly what you're going to talk about. And so what you want to work on is doing that for each of those components of the introduction. So you have just keywords to remind you what you're going to talk about. You don't have to, for the speaker credibility, write, my name is, and you certainly don't need your name on there. Okay, so think about that. You can write, maybe your first name and then number of years that you've been working with the organization. So maybe I'd write, for speaker credibility, Christine. I probably wouldn't even write my whole name out because I see Chris and I know what that means. That's me. Or maybe you just want to write me. Tell the audience about me, my name, and then 6 years. And that way you remember, oh, I've been working with this organization for 6 years. Now, I have not been working with Pet Rescue by Judy for 6 years as a volunteer. I have been working with Pet Rescue by Judy for, oh my goodness, it must be like 14 or 15 years now as a service learning project in my classes. And it's a wonderful organization. But you want to make sure that you're saying the information that is accurate for that. Just want to make sure that I was clear that I don't have 6 years of volunteer experience with Pet Rescue by Judy. I wish I did. It's a great organization. Okay, so that's index card number 4. The last index card is your conclusion. Your conclusion has 3 parts to it. You're restating the thesis. You're summarizing the main points. You're creating closure. These are all based on your introduction. You just worked on the introduction. Should be very easy to work on the conclusion at this point. So once again, you don't do this linearly. You start with the body of your speech. You work on each of those cards first. Then you go back, you work on the introduction. The last card is the conclusion, and you work on that one. And again, you're just making small parts, so conclusion. And then you just write some keywords to remind you what you're going to say for those particular things. You always want to end with what you started with your open with impact. So going back to that story about Raz, creating that closure. And keep in mind that conclusion, it's about how you say it, not necessarily what you say. So it's the pacing of making sure that people understand that you're at the end of your presentation. And that's how you create that closure. It's the pacing of your voice more than anything else. But now you have cards that you can practice with. As you practice, you're going to reduce the number of cards you have because you're going to realize I have practiced the introduction so many times, I've got that. I don't need that as I practice. So you get rid of that card completely. Usually speakers don't even have a card for the introduction. And then as you practice your main points, if you have a short speech, a 4 to 6 minute presentation or shorter, you'll probably end up combining all 3 main points on one single card. And I have an example of that right here. And this is an index card in progress. So you can see there's a lot of scratches on it and those types of things. This is not the one that I would use for my presentation. I would make sure I have a nice clean copy without the scribbles and those types of things for my presentation. So yeah, are you going to use 5 index cards for your speech? No, you're going to start with using 5 index cards, but then you're going to go through versions of those cards and rewrite them and rework them. And by the end, for your presentation, you'll probably be holding maybe 2 or 3 cards for a longer speech. For a short speech that's about 4 to 6 minutes or shorter, you'll probably only need 1 card. But do keep in mind, if you have more than 1 card, you do want to make sure that you number them in some way. So if you do drop them or get them out of order, you can easily get them back in place. But index cards, super easy. Make sure you're buying a pack of 100. You're going to need at least 100 index cards for this semester, even though you don't have 100 speeches. As you can see, you're going to go through a lot of index cards. You'll probably go through 20 or 30 index cards for every presentation. So hopefully this helped you with developing your speech. Good luck and happy speech making.